Welcome to the webinar. My name is Mike Lockerbie. I'll be your host and presenter for today. This webinar features the iFarm, J&M iFarm cloud-based weighing system by Agrimatics. Looking at the agenda, we'll start with a brief introduction. We'll do a full demo of the iFarm system. We'll cover frequently asked questions and key selling points, and we'll field some questions at the end. As I mentioned, my name is Mike Lockerbie. I'm the co-founder of Bitstrata Systems. We're a technology company. We specialize in connecting industrial systems to the cloud using mobile devices. We use that technology to create our agricultural brand, Agrimatics, the product line featuring the Agrimatics Libra grain cart weighing and data management system. It's been on the market now for just over a year and has had terrific success in the marketplace. It really resonates with farm operators, today's farm operators, because of its connectivity and its powerful simplicity. And we've partnered with J&M to create their flagship electronics product, J&M iFarm by Agrimatics. So let's get started with a demonstration. So hi again, everybody. You should be able to now see our iPad, a large version of it on your split screen. And as you can see, iFarm is broken into two components. There's an electronics box, which we call the iFarm device. And it's a hardened, weatherproof device that can be mounted right on the cart itself. And the other piece is the user-supplied iPad mobile device. The two communicate wirelessly. And so, as I say, this piece can stay on the cart. J&M installs them at factory right on the cart, just behind this baffle right here that's the support for the hopper. And it's mounted right beside the junction box that wires into the load bar sensors on the cart. So this lives right there. It can survive all sorts of weather, hot, cold, different kinds of moisture, rain, snow, whatever it is. And we're going to concentrate primarily on the mobile device because that's really where all the functionality of the iFarm system comes into play. As you can see, certainly on your display, that it has the familiar look that operators are used to. It has a multi-digit display, actually has two of them in the light blue area, and a set of buttons. These are features that customers are used to. So we provided that familiar look to put them at ease. And on this main page here, that's the display tab. You can see the lower left corner of the display. It says display. That's that main page, shows that kind of information. And from that, a customer can do all kinds of basic weighing. It has a tare button so that they can, no matter what the weight is on the grain cart, they can choose to hit that. And it effectively zeroes out the display. And I can just show you, I've got a simulator here because I don't have a grain cart in the room with me. Well, not a real one. We can load up that display with a certain amount of weight. And if I hit the tare button, my display seemingly goes to 0. And yet I can clear that and it comes back to the full weight. But the system is far more than a basic weighing system. It also provides full data management and finger touch control. So these sets of text here, there's 4 sets of text written East Quarter, Silver, Peterbilt, Bin 1, and Mike. At the touch of a button, a person can change the field, the top line, just tap it, and there's a list of fields that your customer can set up ahead of time to describe his farm. All of the data is set up hierarchically as grower, farm, and field, so it's very, very flexible, whether it's a single farm operation, multi-farm operation, even multi-growers. Custom harvesters would like that, so they can choose all of their customers line by line. But as you can see, the cart operator can easily select the particular field quite easily, and now that shows up here. The text right beside it that says 0 pounds just indicates how many pounds of produce has come off of that field so far. Quite similarly, you can select at the touch of a button from a list of trucks that you can set up. You can set up multiple lists of trucks, and we'll get into the details as to how to do that shortly. But here on the Smith trucks group, I've got a number of trucks I can choose from. I've also entered ahead of time that I've got a custom trucker that I like to use as well. And he has a blue Mack truck and a red International truck, and I can easily select from those. And finally, a person can select from a set of bins, actually groups of bins. So you can have multiple bin yards and a number of bins in each yard. Those destinations where the produce will go, as I say, they're typically bins, but they could be contracts as well. So here I've got a contract number entered. I'll just select that one. And finally there, you can also select from a set of operators, equipment operators, the names of people that will be driving the tractor and controlling the system. Today, well, my name's Mike. We're going to leave it as Mike. There's also 3 sets of text here that you can edit that describe manually made measurements that you've made on your crop. Here you can enter the moisture content in percent. We'll just change that to be 15%. And now that shows up there. Here we can change the temperature, and here we can change the test weight. If you've done a manual test on your crop, you can enter that there. All of that data from the field, the truck, the destination, the operator, temperature, humidity, or moisture, I should say, and the test weight, all of that data is stored with every transaction. Now we'll talk about what a transaction is. A basic weighing system, you don't make transactions. In order to manage your data, you'd be writing down things. Here, it's handled all internal to the device, and for that matter, it can be entirely automatically. If you look near the multi-digit displays, you'll see the text auto. Our iPad here running the iFarm app has been set up in auto mode, and with that, automatically the system determines how much weight has been transferred from the cart to the truck. So here I've just simulated, I've loaded up the cart with 18,000 pounds. You can see that on each display. And as soon as the system starts to determine that the grain is being transferred, and again, no buttons to push in this case, grain is beginning to be transferred from the cart to the truck, the system notices that and then records into its memory exactly how much has been transferred. All the information, again, like the field, the truck, the bin, the operator, the moisture, temperature, test weight, GPS location, if your mobile device supports that, time of day, date, crop. There's just a huge number of bits of information that can be used so you can manage it later. I'll just demonstrate the auto unload right now. So the cart was loaded up to 18,000 pounds, and we engaged the auger to transfer it into the truck, and all of a sudden the weight begins to drop. Soon enough, the system notices this, and it displays instead on the top line how much has been unloaded so far. At the end of your transfer, you disengage the auger and the PTO. The system will determine that it's done, and that weight gets transferred to that field and into the truck. And ultimately, if that truck is now finished being filled and is going to dump his load into the destination, in this case, well, let's put it in a bin instead of at this contract. So I'll touch the bin or the destination thing, and I'll put it in yard 2, bin 4. Now that truck is at that bin, and if I know that truck's been emptied, I'll hit the empty button, which is right beside the text that says Blue Mac 1252 pounds. I hit empty, and that essentially tells the system the truck is no longer has a load on it, and that weight has been transferred into the bin. And that's really it. This really frees up an operator's day to really do what's important, which is move the grain from the combine to the truck. So his responsibilities, other than that moving of the grain, is to select which field is being harvested. So he can do that once per changing of the field. He gets to select which truck is currently being filled. We're going to say it's the orange Ford. And he selects where that Ford should go. So he can do that once per every time that he changes bin. Each time you change the operator, you can select from the list, and now maybe Randy has taken over. And the next time that a transaction is recorded, all of that information gets stored with that. just as a little bit more detail on the basics of the weighing, you can see that both of the two multi-digit displays show the same information. So currently it's telling us that the cart has 6,080 pounds on it. If I hit the tare button, my display, my main display, shows 0. What that does is it effectively puts a bookmark in the situation to show that things are from that point. If I add weight now, the second weight definitely goes up by however much I add, but also the top line goes up by that amount. So I can see exactly how much I put on past the point at which I hit tare. Now, it turns out that that doesn't matter for the actual weighing of the system. The automatic system doesn't matter what is being displayed. What does matter is your system is calibrated. It doesn't even really matter if it's been zeroed properly, because the system only looks at the difference. If we talk again about the auto aspect of this thing, as I mentioned, when the weight starts to drop, the system is doing all sorts of computation to determine, is that truly an unload process? It does a great job of differentiating that between the bouncing that you may see as you go across the field at any rate. You'll get maybe 10,000, even 20,000 pounds of up and down as you go across the field. And the system needs to properly determine is that unloading or not. And of course it's not. The system does a great job of that. But when it finally decides, it might take 3 to 10 seconds to decide when you are unloading that it's truly unloading. The weight has dropped. But when it does decide that, it looks back in its memory and finds the very, very best start weight, the most stable, higher weight that's been looked at in recent history. And that's what it starts with. At the end of the process, the weight levels out and it decides now he's done. It finds the best weight there as well. It takes the difference, and that's the weight that's stored in the memory of the device. So we'll move forward and look at the Fields tab, which is the second tab along the bottom there. I've pre-entered a number of a single grower, but if I were a custom harvester, I might choose another grower as well. Here, I've just named it the generic name, in this case, Smith Family Farms. Now, if I want to look and see which farms are related to that, I can hit the information button, the I with the arrow beside it, just to the right. And I've entered 2 farm names with that grower, and I can look into the Lockhart Farms and see that I've entered a single field. Now, you can have as many fields as you choose. There is truly no limit. Ultimately, the limit will be the number of the amount of memory that the customer has. See that look clear there. The amount of memory that the customer has selected when he purchased his iPad. Bear in mind that it really has no impact, because no matter how rich this data set is, it's still very, very small with respect to today's amounts of memory that you would choose for such a device. But now if we want to look in there, you can see it says field 1 is soybeans, and that so far we've harvested 42,000 pounds. If we want to look into the details, I hit the I button, and I can see that we've so far done 5 transactions. You can see the date and the time, which truck was used in that, and what bin that ultimately that went to. And it'll even show the dry and the wet weights for each of those loads. Here you can see that this field has been pre-configured with its name of field 1, 160 acres, which would be typical in many scenarios. Shows the total in wet and dry pounds. Here we've selected the commodity as soybeans, but just to demonstrate that that's flexible, if you hit the select commodity button there in blue, you can select from any number of things that are pre-configured, and you can add your own as well if this list isn't enough. But let's just change it. It's going to be corn now. So if we go back, now that commodity shows up as corn. So this is typically how data is collected automatically, but you can also edit the data. If it turns out that you know there's a mistake and you know what the problem was, if you knew on a particular load that happened at a certain time, you could identify it here. In this case, we'll look at the second line. If I go to the I button for that, we could change the weight. We could change the test weight, operator, add a note, change the moisture, the temperature, the commodity of that load. And then here you can see, you can even select where that one lives. So I can change now that if I choose so, I could change it that it really belonged with bin 4. If I do that and go back, that transaction will disappear from my list. And the reason is because the list I'm looking at, is that true? Let's see. No, it doesn't disappear. I'm sorry. That it just shows it as bin 4, and that's correct. It also doesn't show a particular truck because there's no record of which truck took it to bin 4. So let's just say that it's the orange truck and bin 4. Let's go back, and it shows it's the orange Ford. If we go back and change field, for instance, the Lockhart Farm, if we go to field 1 and look at its transactions, okay, let's look at the third transaction. And we actually change which field it's on, then, as I was saying before, it will transfer, it'll move to a different field, so it'll actually disappear from this list. So now we've only got 4 ones on this one, and if we go back and find that field in the other farm, that transaction appears there. So it's very, very easy to make quality edits to the data as required. Very easy. And of course, deleting is as simple as anybody who's run an iOS device knows that you swipe to the left to delete. I'm not going to bother deleting that. So you understand now how the fields are set up, and you can easily add by hitting the plus button at any point in time to either the grower or the grower's farms or the fields on that farm. If we look at the trucks, they're organized in a somewhat similar way. You can have groups of trucks. I've entered 2 groups, the Smith trucks, so the trucks that belong to my farm, also a custom trucker. We look at the fleet of Smith trucks. I've created a Ford, an orange Ford, and a silver Peterbilt. And if we go to the custom trucker one that I've set up, there's a blue Mack truck and a red International truck. And it shows the most recent load that went through that particular truck. If we drill down a little further, by the way, for instance, the blue Mack truck last moved some corn, and that last load was 12,516 pounds. But if we drill down by hitting the I, it'll show all the loads that that truck has done. And you can pre-configure what the tare weight is, that's the unladen weight of the truck, as well as what the maximum gross vehicle weight is that's allowable for that truck on the roads. The system can help you then ensure that it never exceeds the max allowable GVW so that you don't end up with tickets, but it lets you be as efficient as you possibly can by filling that truck to the limit. And as we indicated earlier, selecting from the main page is very, very easy at the touch of a button. So typically, the only time that you have to use these other fields, like these other tabs, like the field tab or the truck tab, or we get into the destination tab, is for configuring of those fields, trucks, and destinations, and also for viewing the data and editing the data. But for the most part, the operator's really looking at the main screen here and just selecting, rarely, just selecting what he needs to change the field, as well as which truck he's filling and the bin destination for where that's going. We move over now to the Destinations tab. Again, very much like the rest, you can set up groups of destinations, contracts, and vineyards and things like that. Create them by hitting the plus. You can create new destination groups. And if we drill down into any one of them, it really shows your inventory, shows how much weight is in a particular bin or on a contract. And like before, you can drill down into it. You can see all the loads that went in. Further, these are truck loads. So this is bin 3, shows the inventory total weight, wet and dry, shows all the truckloads that have gone into that bin. You can even drill down into the truckload, and it'll show all the details for each of those. The next tab is the Operators tab. I put in a few names here. I'm Mike, so we're going to go with Mike again, and that means that on the main page, Mike is now displayed. So all future transactions, until that gets changed again, are attributed to me. The next couple of tabs kind of work together. We'll actually start with the Settings tab. So this configures the iFarm app appropriately. Here you can select the units of measure for weight. We have choices of pounds, kilograms, or bushels, as well as temperature, so Celsius or Fahrenheit. We'll talk about remote mode in a little while. You can also set the season, so you can set a start date or close date really for your season. Here it's today, and you can select which season you're looking at. So when you've been using this for a number of years, you're going to have a lot of data, And all the data is stored at all times right in the device. And so you can select when to close out a season. So you can look at a snapshot of what happened during a particular season. If we look at this part of the pane, the lower half, it says iFarm demo. It's got a check mark. What that means is that refers to this box right here. I've named this one iFarm demo. And if we want to have a look and see what it's got to say, is we could change the name of that. So you might choose to name it by the name of the cart because the electronics lives on the cart. We can set up the display rounding that we see when connected to this device. Display rounding really means how much does the weight have to change before the system will register and show that as a change. Set up to 20 pounds right now. And that's probably the way I would use it. It means that your eyes won't be distracted. The weight has to change significantly before the display will bother updating it. It doesn't mean that you lose any data. What it does mean is that it's less distracting. So if we were to bring it down to 1 pound instead of 20, that means that every time the weight on that cart moves even a pound, the display will update, and it may, as I say, distract your eye. So I'm going to leave it at 20. The next two tabs, or the next two fields, relate to the automatic unload detection. So currently, you can see that the unload detection switch is set to green, which means it's enabled, and that is the automatic unload. I'm just going to cancel out of here. If we go back to the main display page, you can see the text auto near the multi-digit displays. That does mean that it's automatically detecting, as I showed you, demonstrated earlier. I'm just going to get back to the settings page. What the min load or minimum load field is, it's a parameter that the system uses in its automatic unload detection software. And you can leave it at 1,000 for just what any conceivable scenario. And what that really means is it's a method of setting a level at which you're happiest with the performance of it. At 1,000, it means that any automatically detected transactions the system detects has to be greater than or more than 1,000 pounds before it'll believe it. And so if the system thought there was an unload happening and it came out to be 300 pounds or 700 pounds, it would just throw that one away and say that probably wasn't a true unload. And what it does is it sets a balance between nuisance trips from bouncing around in the field to getting quality unload detection. So that being said, when you're running in auto mode, almost never do you have to manually tell it, I'm unloading now, because it'll do a good job of that. But in the case that you do need to, say, empty the cart, you got the 200 pounds that just need to be unloaded. For that, with automatic unload detection, it won't automatically detect that. So in those scenarios, let's go back to the weight page, you would use instead the manually accessible buttons. You'd hit the unload button, which is just beside tear and clear. The system would then be ready to register the change in weight, and then you hit the button beside it once you're there with save, and it'll take the difference in weight from the time that you hit the unload button to the time you hit save, and it registers that as the transaction. So that happens rarely. Let's go back to the settings. Smoothing is a very interesting feature. As I mentioned, when traveling through the field, there can be a lot of weight bounce. And we have seen situations where there could be 15,000 pounds of bounce, depending on the speed with which you're going and the terrain, how rough it is, and what's in your cart. So in order to keep that display smoother in those circumstances, we've got technology built into it called display smoothing. You can turn that on. It's a bit difficult to demonstrate because we don't have a vehicle going through the fields like that. But with that on, when the system knows you're not actually unloading, it will smooth the display so it doesn't react very quickly, and it's less distracting, and you can see better what's on that cart. But because the system does a great job of detecting whether or not it's unloading, when it does detect the unloading, all of a sudden that smoothing is instantly disabled, and you get very responsive display of how much weight is going. So very, very helpful. And you leave it on again. Once it's on, and the system automatically handles that. So I'm just going to turn it off again because it doesn't demo well, except in the field. It's great. Now, if we go back to the device page, it deals with parameters or configuration of the electronics itself. And so the top two fields here are sensitivity and rated capacity. So when a person first installs this, customer installs it on his cart, or if J&M is putting this on at factory, the selection of the load bars that it's connected to will have a specific sensitivity, which means how much signal comes off them for a particular weight. Actually, how much signal for a particular energizing voltage. Typically, a value of 2 millivolts per volt, which is what's in here, is going to be in the ballpark of the right amount. But ideally, we set it exactly according to what the manufacturer's specifications were for those load bars. But as I say, 2 is about in the right ballpark. The next one, rated capacity, relates to how much signal will come off those bars at full weight and what the capacity is of those bars. Quite typically, 50,000 pounds per bar is what many, many different load bars will be. And most, well, I should say many anyway, grain carts will have 2 wheels with a spindle weigh bar on each wheel and a weigh bar in the hitch. So it's a 3-bar system. If each is a 50,000 pound capacity, that cart is a total of 150,000 pounds capacity. And so I won't bother changing it here, but it is very easy to edit. You set that up once, you type in 150,000 pounds for that, and ideally you put in the correct sensitivity, which was likely very near 2. And that configures this. Actually, you have to hit the Save Settings button, and it will actually write that information into the device so that it knows best how to give accurate results. The next step is the calibration of the unit. Again, very, very simple. You need 2 numbers. You need a certified reading and a cart reading. So to get the system to display weights accurately, what a person would do is they'd load up their cart. Ideally, the more the better. And they would transfer some, if not all, again, the more the better, from that cart into an empty truck. The system will record how much it believed that weight was, and it may not be accurate because it's not yet calibrated, but it will record how much that is. And then you take that truck to a static scale or a trusted source of some amount, and you weigh that load that's in the truck. You type those 2 numbers in here, the certified reading and the cart reading, hit calculate. The system comes up with the correct calibration factor, taking into account what the previous calibration factor was that was stored in the device. And once you're done that, you hit Save Settings, and all of that information is stored, as I say, right in the electronics. There's a benefit to that, and we'll get to that when we talk about remote mode, which is coming up right away. Some further details here are the system will show what the firmware version is. That is the version of the software that actually operates on the electronics itself. It's not the version of the app that's operating in the mobile device. But we have software in here, and that will let you see what version that is. By hitting Update Firmware, the system will check with the firmware version that's available from the cloud. And if there's a different version available, it'll alert you, and you can then follow the steps, which are very, very simple. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes of your time to send that new version to the electronics, keeping it up to date. So if we go back to the settings page, we can look here at the upper right-hand corner. Near there, it says Remote Mode. Maybe we better start and say that the 2 pieces of the iFarm are typically the electronics, again mounted on the cart, and it wirelessly connects to that mobile device that's mounted in the cab of the tractor. For that wireless connection, you get about 50 to 100 feet of range, which is plenty of range for any kind of a hitched situation. There's a really interesting feature that we have as well that's called remote mode. So here on the main display, on the primary unit that's recording all the data and displaying the weight, you can see that we've got about 9,100 pounds on the cart. Well, this remote display capability shows, I've got another mobile device. You might be able to see if I hold it just right, and it shows the very same weight, 9,140. And that's because I've got that same app running in remote mode. And if it's possible, you'll be able to see the word remote written there instead of auto, which is on the other display. And so with that, you can have any number of remote displays running mobile devices. I better hold that kind of close. There we go. And as the weight on the cart changes, it'll update here live as well. So where that really shines is the scenario where the cart has pulled up to a combine to service that combine. So the combine operator can then, he's well within a 400-foot range, which is the limitation on remote mode. He's within that range. He can now pull out his iPhone. He can choose, let's see, to hit his own tear button, which effectively zeroes out his display. And you can see there that it doesn't have any effect on the other display. And now, any amount that he adds to the cart increases the weight on the cart as seen by the cart operator. It also increases the weight as seen by him. The lower display here shows the total on the cart, and the upper display shows only that amount that he has added because he had hit tear before that. So he can use that to help calibrate the yield monitor. Very, very useful. Customers really like that feature. Jasmine, are there any notes that I've missed here?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of. Okay, so we covered a lot of the features, if not all the features, of the iFarm product. I guess the last feature, simply on the last tab, there is a help that's right there, right on the device, so that if ever in doubt, it's a great read, let me tell you. It's a short help. Now, what Jasmine told me is that I hadn't yet talked about the cloud service. So as I say, we're with Bitstrata Systems. We're the maker of the Agrimatics technology, and that's the basis of the iFarm product. We're coming up with an optional subscription service that farm operators can choose to participate in. There'll be a fee associated with it, an annual fee. And that cloud service works with both the Agrimatics product line as well as the iFarm product line. What it does, well, I think I actually did miss one thing. So I'm just going to backstep for a second. If you go to the Fields tab, just at the grower level, this is where you can get the data out. I've emphasized so far that all the data is stored in the mobile device and is there for all your years of harvest. Every single transaction is all right there. But to add real value to it, you've got to be able to get your hands on that data outside of a mobile device. So let's go back down to the grower level here. By hitting the share button, which is that box, that rectangle or square just in the upper right-hand corner, tap with the arrow coming out of it. Tapping it, it builds an email that contains all of that data. And no matter how big that data set is, it's still not it's still not really large, so it's easily emailed. And that file there that says transactions.csv, if you can just barely see that file, once you send it home or to your office, you can load that in a standard spreadsheet program like Microsoft Excel, and that has all sorts of features that will let you manage that data, filtering and all sorts of things. So that's how you get the data out. And every time that you create that email, I'll just cancel it now because I'm not going to send it out. Every time that you send that, the entire data set goes. So you can send it once a day, once an hour if you want it. You said once a day, once a week, once a year, wherever you're comfortable and however often you want to see that data. But every single time you'll see all of the data. Now I believe we've covered basically all the features of this product. What I was getting to is that we're coming out with an optional subscription-based cloud service that ties into the iFarm as well as the Agrimatics Libre product, so that if they subscribe to that optional service, all of the data that gets collected by the device gets automatically synchronized to the cloud. So if that customer subscribed and also had a data plan for his iPad, or had some other access to the internet through, say, tethering through his phone, or if he wants to do this in the yard, if he has Wi-Fi in the yard, that data will automatically synchronize to the cloud. And it's only by transaction per transaction. So each time that the customer dumps his cart load into a truck, the system automatically detects that happens and records it in the memory, and that goes to the cloud. Where that shines is you never have to worry about, did I send out my data? It's always stored there for your use. But where the real value comes in is that all the other mobile devices on the farm, whether they're phones or tablets, they're also getting that data. So a case where that is great is you've loaded up a truck. He's heading off to, in this case, bin 4. That's what the iPad shows. And so truck driver takes it to the bin 4. It's in a particular bin yard. He begins to fill that bin, and it turns out that only half of his truckload can get into that bin because the bin is now full. Well, with the subscription, he's got the data at his fingertips. He can make edits right then, right there, with the ease that I showed you earlier. And then all the other operators can see too what has happened. The data is moving. So it becomes very, very transparent as to what's going on. Another case where that's great is if you have multiple cart operators, multiple carts on the farm. So because the data is shared, when the first cart is loading up the truck, the truck total for the orange Ford, it goes up to maybe 30,000 pounds, and that's as many pounds as I could put on it with my cart load, so I go off and service a particular combine. Well, because that data is all shared, the other cart operator can see that that truck is at 30,000 pounds currently. He goes and he carries on filling the truck from 30,000 pounds. Again, all the data is available to all the players. There's a whole lot of more features that are due, but that's the very, very first implementation that's going to be out. There's all sorts of features that are coming. So it's a very, very feature-proof system. All right, I think at that I'm going to move on to the next step. Right. Frequently asked questions. So these are questions that we've been asked, and these are questions that your customers may ask you. So which mobile devices are compatible with the iFarm system? Well, it's compatible with every currently available Apple iOS device, and specifically, and some older ones. Specifically, it's compatible with the iPhone 4S or newer, any iPad mini, the iPad Generation 3 or newer, so that's the iPad Gen 3, 4, or Air, and of course the Air there. So in terms of phones, it's compatible with the 4S, not the 4. So that means the 4, that means the 4S, the 5, 5C, 5S, and presumably any future ones that are coming out. They also wonder about Android support. And because there's been some interest there, we're coming out with a version of Android of the app right away. It's scheduled for September 1st of this year. Do bear in mind that we do all our development for iOS devices first. That's the Apple products first. And so the Android devices will always lag to a degree. And so what we're coming out with for September 1st for Android won't have all the features that you've seen here, but it will catch up. The other thing to note on that too is that not all Android devices will be supported. There's a lot of different operating system versions that are operating on a lot of different kinds of phones. The phone has to have the correct hardware on board, and it has to have the correct version of the Android operating system in order for it to perform properly. And so currently we are targeting the Google Nexus line of products as well as the Samsung Galaxy products. Customers ask, does this system replace existing scale indicators? Yes, it does. So we're compatible with some of the industry's competing products like the Digistar line of products and Avery Weightronics. However, in both cases, when upgrading to our product, the iFarm system, you no longer need the electronics that are provided with either of those two, Digistar or Avery Weightronics. And so you just disconnect the cable that goes to the existing electronics, take it away somewhere you won't be needing it, wire ours in instead. The iFarm comes typically with a 4-pin connector, which is compatible with all Digistar cabling systems and some Avery Weightronics systems. And so it's very easy to connect up. However, some Averys use a 5-pin connector instead. So if you're upgrading, you just need to know whether it's the 4-pin or the 5-pin, and contact the J&M factory and they can get you set up with the correct one. Do any cables need to run between the device and the tractor? Well, none need to run for two reasons. The first is because it is battery powered, so no power has to come from the tractor. The other one is because it's wirelessly communicates. However, in an upgrade situation, a customer may already have a Digistar system, for instance. As I say, he can just disconnect the cable that goes to the Digistar scale indicator electronics that will be in the cab of the tractor, take it away and plug ours in. If he wants to, it's perfectly fine to leave the Libra box, which on its own right is capable of being outdoors, but he can leave it in the cab of the tractor if he likes. The upside of that is real easy. The downside is that he still has a wire going across, or cable going across the hitch. Does the system work with existing load bars? Yes, with just about any load bars that are in existence. Again, the two primary brands are Digistar and Avery Raytronics. How is it powered? Well, it uses a 3.6 volt lithium battery. This is a AA form factor that we're all familiar with, but it's not your typical battery. Those are typically 1.2 to 1.5 volts. This is a 3.6 volt version. And so those you need to be able to provide those from your dealership to your customers. The system design, the electronics itself, is very, very power efficient, and so in almost all cases, there'll be enough power in one AA 3.6 volt lithium battery to power the system for a full year. Most harvest operations will be in the hundreds of hours of operation, 300, 400, 500, that kind of thing. Ours will have no problem handling that, plus waiting the rest of the year while it's doing very little. What we recommend wholeheartedly is do have your customers change the battery before harvest. I guess the other end of that too is the app itself running on the mobile device will likely be best to be plugged into the tractor through a charger. Keep it going all the time. And customers would be advised, they'll figure it out on their own, but to make sure that the screen doesn't go into lock mode or something like that. You want to see that display at all times. So how close does the system need to be from the mobile device? I mentioned early on here that you get about 50 to 100 feet of range between the electronics on the cart and the cab of the tractor for the main unit that is recording all the data and such. And you also get an unlimited number of mobile devices. They're remote users that can see those live weights at the same time within a 400-foot range. So for the case where you're servicing a combine, you're well within that range. When you're servicing a truck, you're well within that range. Does the user need cellular coverage for the system to operate? No, it doesn't. The system is standalone, can be standalone, wireless. It uses Bluetooth Smart as the technology that goes between the device and the mobile device. And for that, you don't need any kind of internet connectivity. To get the data out through an email or through our optional cloud service, you do need to be able to connect the system to the internet, whether through Wi-Fi or through cell. Does the user need a USB drive to share the data? No, we don't support USB drives. We don't support printers and that sort of thing. The system is so easy to get data out that there's very little need for that kind of legacy product. Does the system record the GPS location of a load? Yes. If your mobile device supports GPS, it's recorded along with all the other information for that load. You should note that when selecting an Apple mobile device, tablet in particular, you have an option to either buy it with a cell capability, it'll take a SIM card like a phone will, or not, where it only has GPS. Well, that's a decision you can make as to whether you want to, at some point, be able to use our subscription service live in the field. For that, you would want to set the SIM capability. But also, Apple limits the GPS capability to only those units that have the cellular capability. So if you buy a Wi-Fi only unit, you don't get GPS. And our system then wouldn't record that information. Can the mobile device be used for other purposes while connected to the iFarm? Yes, the app can operate in the background. And so you could take calls if you're operating on an iPhone, or you could do whatever else you might need to do, check something on the web. But generally, you want to see that display because it acts as your indicator for the thing. We did have a customer, at least one customer, who's an early adopter, and he insisted on using his phone instead of a tablet. A problem can arise there, not technically, it works fine. The problem is with behavior. People typically will use their phone like a phone and not like a tablet, so they'll keep it in their pocket. They're not looking at it all the time. And if they change operators, maybe Mike leaves the cart and Randy comes and takes over for the cart. Well, if it's using Mike's phone to do the job of the indicator and Mike takes off with his phone, all of a sudden the system is left without a system. So we recommend using a tablet, having it mounted on a RAM mount or equivalent, and that typically you're running it in the foreground. It'll work fine. It'll do all the automatic work, all the automatic unload detection, all the data recording while it's in the background as well. We definitely recommend that you run it in the foreground where you can. At this point, we'll field some questions. All right, we've got a question here. It says, is it available with smartphone application or Android? So I'll just speak the answers here. Yes, this works with any iPhone, iPhone 4S or later, and we are coming up with an Android version shortly. As I say, the features will lag somewhat, but it will catch up. Will there be a seminar for Android? We don't plan to have a seminar specifically for Android, but it will function, ultimately it will function identically. The first version, as I say, some of the features will lag, but it's just a question of us not enabling some of those features until they're tried and true. But it will ultimately look exactly like what you've just seen here. Which features, I've got a question about which features will be missing initially. So the very first version of the Android will enable remote mode, and so you can do basic weighing and remote weighing, but none of the data capabilities will be there immediately. So where that is useful is get an iPad or equivalent for the cab of the tractor, and then combine operator or other operators that want to see the live weights for calibrating yield monitor and that sort of thing. They can use their Android devices for that. We've got another question. Says, do you have a recalibration system for popcorn? I don't entirely follow the question, so if the person who asked that question could rephrase, that'd be fine. Another question is, do you have to recalibrate before every use? And no, the calibration factors are stored in the Libre device itself. I don't think I mentioned one of the benefits to that is then you get calibrated weights right off of the device. So whether you're viewing it on a remote, which is listening to the device, or you're viewing it on the primary iPad that's in the cab of the tractor, you get the very same calibrated result. And you would typically calibrate certainly like one time per year. Yeah. Just reading a question here for a moment. Yes, Android and Apple will work together in remote mode. So as I say at the moment, use your Android for remote and use the Apple device as your main unit. Once Android gets all the features in it, you can use it as the main unit if you like, and it doesn't matter. You can mix and match Android or Apple as remotes. Just having a look to see if there's anything that I missed. Yes, and there was one last question. It was wanted to clarify whether or not the automatic unload detection needs to have you control anything? Well, the user would just control the auger, engaging the PTO and gate as required, and do the transfer. And the system automatically detects how much has been transferred. So if there are any further questions, please type them now. Otherwise, I think we're just about done. We'll just wait around here for a couple minutes. There's another question says, if we have an Android tablet, an iPhone 5, would you recommend having the iPhone as the main device in the tractor to maintain functionality? Yes, that would function technically. There'd be no problem with that. Again, I do strongly recommend that you use a tablet in the cab of the tractor, or at least be very, very careful with the behavior to make sure that that iPhone is plugged in so that it doesn't go dead on you. Make sure that when you are using it for other purposes like taking phone calls or doing whatever else you might do on that device, that that you go back to the app, the J&M iFarm app, just to make sure that everything is functional. Make sure that you haven't gone over a rock and wrecked your cabling or whatever. So that's the only thing. It's a behavior-related thing. I've got a question specifically about pricing. I really am not at liberty to say what the price is. I did blurt out a number, but it'd be best to talk with the factory representatives or look at your price book and find out what the list price is. No, I've got a question as to whether or not there are any apps that shouldn't be used while using J&M iFarm. There's really no limitation. As a matter of fact, I may have mentioned that we use Bluetooth Smart as the communication technology between the iFarm device and the mobile device, and it's really well suited to this, and it doesn't interfere with cell connectivity, doesn't interfere with Wi-Fi or even classic Bluetooth. So if you are listening to music through a Bluetooth headset or something like that, that everything continues to work. And so far as I know, the question was specifically whether Netflix would interfere. I don't think it does, and I suppose these days with AutoSteer, that's probably a possibility. Yeah, I guess the thing to point out there again is behavior-wise, it's best to be able to see the indicator operating while you're using it because it is an indicator. Yes, and we got a point that what was not mentioned was the moisture tester and the AutoGate shutoff. Yes, J&M iFarm has two very interesting features, indeed those things, moisture sensor and AutoGate shutoff. And so with those, you might have seen at the beginning of the demonstration that you can manually enter the percent moisture as well as the temperature. With those options enabled, which are separate features that you can choose to purchase, then those are automatically populated. Every time that you do a transaction, you do a dump from the cart to the truck, those are updated in real time, so nobody has to necessarily type anything in. Got a question that I didn't entirely, I guess that's the same person was asking, says, when will those features be available? Those are available today, the gate shutoff and the moisture. Got a question that says, can you run the iPad and iPhone for control at the same time? Great question. You can only have one primary device controlling the Libre device at one time. You have lots of them set up. One iPad could potentially be used in one cart and then later in another cart. You could also have the opposite true, where you'd have different mobile devices effectively paired to a particular iFarm device. But yes, only one at one time. So once, say, an iPad is paired up and connected logically, connected wirelessly to an iFarm device, then all other devices that might be interested in connecting with that one can only connect in remote mode. got a question here. It says, is there any way to have customers who have purchased this for this fall sit in on a meeting such as this? Yeah, it's entirely possible we could set something up. For those that did miss this webinar, we did record it, so potentially we can get it to be distributed to dealers and such, and they could show it to groups of their, well, show it around the office as required. And yeah, we could probably set something up to educate customers. Are there any other questions? J&M should put this webinar on their website. That's a comment by one viewer. All right. Well, with that, I think we might call it a close. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for attending, and for those that had to wait an extra hour. We appreciate your patience, and I'm glad that you could all attend. Thank you.